All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 2024, and this is the SIG Cloud Provider office hours. SIG Cloud Provider is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which basically means treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so. Please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. I would encourage everyone to add yourself to the attending list if you feel so inclined on our agenda. And I guess I'll go through the sub-project updates and the agenda, and then we'll come back to bug triage at the end. So, does anyone have any provider updates that they would like to share with us? Okay, not seeing any hands going up, so I'm guessing that everyone is good for the moment. And then going on to the agenda, I had added this because it had come up. We had been pinged about it in the SIG channel. I guess we have some failing tests, and we need to take a look at it. Now they're coming out of the GCP suite, and it looks like it's failing because of the way we've changed one of the interfaces. So just let me see if I can link through to the grid here. We can see that these tests are in a pretty bad shape. And, some of these, three of them are SIG Cloud Provider tests. And I just drilled into one of the failures kind of at random when I was looking at it. And, someone pointed out that these error lines are coming from the default provider interface in the testing. And so one of the things that Antonio had kind of posited on the on this review here is that these tests need to be refactored in some way. And so I took a quick look at what he was talking about, and I kind of concur that someone's going to need to get into these tests and really pull them apart to make it work. But that kind of leaves us with a question here, which is that, if we have to turn these tests off for the moment to fix them, we'll have some sort of reduced, coverage on the testing. Maybe they're not working now anyways. What is kind of the next best step here? Should myself and maybe a few others go to SIG testing and bring this topic up to figure out, is there a preferred way to handle this? Or should we just put up a PR to disable those tests while we refactor things? I guess I kind of brought it here to see if anyone had thoughts or ideas.
I before we quite go there, Almiko, could you go back to the test for a second? All right.
Do you want to look at the grid or the actual prow?
I was wondering because these are DNS. Are they all DNS tests or?
No, these two were the ones that were really concerning to me. These should be able to add nodes and should be able to delete nodes, because it looked like what it wanted to do was use what I previously thought was a wrapper around a script file that removed nodes from the GCP, back end. But now when I look at the code that's failing here, it looks like it's going to this default provider interface and just returning that error message. So I think we probably need to get in there and figure out what has happened. Why is it not, what's going on with those tests?
I agree with that. I guess the thought that I was having was, if I understand, there maybe it is just us, and I can certainly dig in. But resize nodes makes me wonder. I'm just wondering if there are any other SIGs, kind of going to your initial point of, are we losing testing? Are there other SIGs that are relying on these tests? And if so, I'd like to make sure that we notify them as well, both because they may have opinions and because maybe they can help. And so I was just trying to work out, we had gone through those so quickly. All I saw was DNS, and I had been wondering if maybe that was SIG networking, or if these are about auto scaling, if this is this is maybe like an auto, yeah, we should let the auto scaling folks know. But
Right.
I also agree. We need to look and understand why that's going on. And I'll have to try and make time for this. Yeah. Okay.
Just so you know, the one that he went past kind of quickly, I just put a link to it in the chat. It says in the anything else we need to know, I haven't verified this, of course, but it says support for GCE instance groups was removed, so these tests need to be updated. So that specific one might have been, oh, something changed in the cloud provider, and therefore the tests are just not correct for that cloud provider anymore.
Well, right. This is kind of where the
In that
confusion
specific
comes.
one.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is where the confusion comes in, is that, and I tried to look at the tests. I went back through the through the issue that had come up, but just looking at the test directly, yeah, like you can see why it's failing. I think like we need to get into this investigation that kind of Walter's hinting at, which is like,
Yeah.
what is the context for this? Are there others relying on it? To me, it just looked like we had changed something in the way that nodes are being added and removed. And so I would imagine that is also impacting our node lifecycle tests, but I didn't see those failing in the same way. So yeah, like someone needs to get in there and just like start pulling things apart and figure out what's going on, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah. All right. Can you go ahead and assign me on this one? And then I'm going to have fun on Friday, clearly.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate it.
And Walter, if it looks to you like this is probably going to affect other providers as well, feel free to also add me, and I can try to pull our Peng Fei and team in.
Okay. Sounds good. I mean, I know there have been some things in that area. I haven't had to dig recently, but I know there's been a big push recently for us to try and get away from global DNS and try pushing regional DNS. So I don't know if that's related, but yeah, let me dig.
Is this test suite inside the main Kubernetes test suite, or is this a specific? Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
These are coming out of the main like ED test suite. So if we go in like I mean, you probably know where this is already.
Since the provider's being split out, shouldn't the tests be split out?
Well, yeah, like if the tests, this is where we get into like the really kind of complicated part of this. When you look at the way these tests were written, originally, let me say, I don't know if, yeah, I think it's this one. There were like skips in here, right? So like theoretically, these tests should only be running on those platforms. And we had other tests that would look for like AWS and Azure and whatnot. So like,
Got it.
theoretically, these tests should only be running on GCP. I wouldn't expect them to have any effect anywhere else.
Well, but so I think this is a really important point. So I mean, I've been down this road a few times. There are a lot of tests which are trying to test generic Kubernetes behaviors, but where for one reason or another, the framework around the test needs to do something that is cloud provider specific. So, I mean, as someone who's responsible for having authored a few of these tests, I mean, an example on the API machinery side is there are some tests where you're trying to run specific kinds of workloads that you have to write the workload to the service, the cloud provider. And so I wrote the GCP version of those workloads, got them testing, the works there. I mean, and so I know those tests work. And in fact, I think someone from Red Hat, actually, for the ones I'm thinking about. And so you'll see a skip unless Red Hat, GCP. And so those tests only work on Red Hat and GCP, but they are testing how the Kube API server functions. So we need, at some point and this has been flagged a few times through SIG Cloud Provider's history of this idea of we have fundamental core KK tests but the things you have to do to make those tests work are cloud provider specific. I mean, another one that I've dealt with, I didn't write the test, but I've certainly debugged them a few times, is in SIG node, you want to make sure that the node's networking works if it gets taken down and comes back up again. And so the test will go in and run a particular set of, service network shutdown, service network restart. And that's all depending on how Google happens to set up their nodes. And, so it really requires, if you want to run that test on any other cloud provider, you need to do that, but whatever the equivalent version of that set of commands is.
I think that's a great point, Walter. And this is, to me, this is like when you look back at the way the tests were developed kind of organically, when everything was in tree, it was really easy just to say, oh yeah, spawn a cluster, give it cloud provider GKE, and let's just go on to the next, point of business. And I think there are probably tests that are like that. And when we started to remove the cloud provider stuff, and Antonio and Dims really hit this full force. Yeah, we started to notice other tests that were like breaking because they were just expecting that the in-tree CCM stuff would be
Sure,
there.
but
So
that still seems like it's a decision of how we test core functionality that SIG testing should own, not cloud provider, right? That's like, how are we going to test these core things that need a cluster that works, and we need to know how the cluster works? Here's our list of providers we've chosen to use, the setups we like to use for them, and then those tests would need to be owned not by a cloud provider, because that's not our scope, right?
yeah, no, I think that makes a really good. I mean, I think you make a really good
I don't
point.
know how much inertia that there. It sounds like there's too much inertia to change it at this point, but
Well, but yeah, go ahead,
I
Walter.
was going to say that I think actually that, I mean, there are places where things are not clearly owned by one SIG. And so
sure.
should SIG testing be involved in this? Absolutely. I will also say, like in the examples I've come up with, either API machinery or Node should be involved, and I think we should be involved. I think for the most part, it should probably be us and maybe SIG, oddly, SIG release and SIG testing. So some of these tests, I mean, one of the things I have pitched a few times is that maybe if it's too difficult to write the tests outside of cloud provider scope, that we have these, we have cloud provider GCP, with cloud provider AWS, with cloud provider Azure. If we could find a way to run the tests not in KK Core, but in the cloud provider and report the results back, this might solve some of those problems for tests that are trying to do really wacky things like restart the networking stack on a kubelet and make sure that the node actually gets, recovers properly.
Yeah, I think what you're saying just like makes me think, like when I brought up the testing stuff kind of early last year, I talked with SIG testing about it. There was a good discussion there. I think Patrick Ole also has some really good ideas about this. It seems like we're on the precipice of like, that is one of the next things we need to do, is we need to get to that point where there's a cleaner interface around how the cloud provider plugs into the testing structure. And then my personal feeling about SIG testing's involvement is that we probably need information at the SIG testing level to help us say, okay, this is where you can go as a source of truth to understand how these tests are put together. And, that doesn't mean they have to have ownership over the cloud provider part, but that means that they could have ownership over, informing people that when you want to look at these tests, these are how everything comes together. And maybe they have some of that, but I'm happy to go to SIG testing and kind of, bring this up again, because we had a good discussion last year. I think it'd probably be fruitful to have another one.
Absolutely. And I mean, to Chris's point, I do think that where possible, I mean, and to your point as well, Amico, I think there was a certain amount of convenience in writing to a specific cloud provider because it was there, it worked, you could exclude it, and KK would still get the results. I think some of the time we're going to find it's too difficult to do it any other way. But a lot of the time, like if we just did it because, and I'm not trying to be disparaging when I say this, But if we did this because we were being lazy and it was convenient, maybe this is actually, as Chris suggested, somewhere where a more disciplined approach coming out of SIG testing to all the other SIGs can show how many of these problems can be solved in a way that isn't cloud provider specific.
Yeah, spot on, Walter. Totally agree. So I guess I can take an action item to go to a SIG testing meeting in the next couple weeks and start bringing this topic up again, and at least ask them about this specific failure and what maybe is a best way to move forward on that. Does anybody else have thoughts or comments they want to add in? Or questions, I guess? Yeah, well, and Bridget, yeah, like that was why I wanted to harp on testing in the next year's projects, because I think fixing this for the Kubernetes community will make a really big impact, because then the cloud providers, can have ownership over their testing pathways, and it'll just my dream is that it'll be clear. People can just say, oh yeah, like this is how you put the cluster together. There's the cloud provider, and it won't be confusing. So that when we try to make a change like this in the future, tests just start failing and people are trying to figure out what's happening and everything. Okay, I guess if there's no other comments or questions about that topic, we can move on to the next one. Bridget, please.
Yes. So I just wanted to update everyone that the lazy consensus period and then some passed. I was too lazy to finish lazy consensus, or at least too busy. But I did start going through the various and sundry, make this change in this owner's file, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's all being tracked in the linked issue. And if anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, we can handle them on GitHub, but it should be exactly as expected. And I hope we'll be smoothing. Pull requests will be merged quickly. That's the the SIG chair dream, right? I pray that my pull requests be merged quickly.
Totally.
So say we all.
Yeah, right. All right, cool. Yeah. Thank you for following up on that laundry list too. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there.
Yeah, I may or may not have a message thread going with Bob Killen saying like, so wait, what am I supposed to do over here? Because some of the things, there's a link, great. And some of them are like, just do this thing with no link or information. And I'm like, So I'm going to attempt to get that a little clarified. And maybe PR in more changes to the template as I tend to. So there's that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And I guess you've got the next topic too about KubeCon. Oh
yeah. So I added it because we just recently actually were getting colleagues pinging our Mark Rossetti, my other colleague who is a SIG Windows chair, because they wanted to speak at KubeCon China in the SIG Windows, maintainer slot. And I thought, yes, okay. I don't think we got a SIG Cloud Provider one in for KubeCon China, but it's not too late for KubeCon US. Presumably when it usually is like it opens, the maintainer track stuff opens after the general public one closes. The general public one is going to close, I think, June 9th. So I would imagine shortly thereafter, we will be submitting our maintainer track session. And so I want to kind of put that out there as like hey, if you are participating in SIG Cloud Provider and you would like to participate, maybe if you know you're going to be at the conference, that would be super great to know. I'm gonna toss it to Chris. I'm waiting for him to take a drink and then saying, Chris, I'm gonna toss it to you and say, hey, what do you think? Should people participate in giving the SIG Cloud Provider update, even if they feel like, who am I to give the SIG Cloud Provider update? What do you think?
I think they absolutely should participate. They'll be well supported and it's a fun experience. And you get to have a speaker badge, which doesn't mean much, but hey, it says speaker and that makes you feel cool.
And your company is happy because it doesn't take up one of their slots.
It is. Yep. They're happy. And then they get really excited that, oh my God, we have a speaker. They don't even, you don't even have to be shilling much for the organization. They're just thrilled to have someone on stage.
So many upsides.
Yeah, so there's a lot of upsides. So that if you're sitting on this call and I'm looking at you, John, I'm looking at Kirthan, I'm looking at anybody who hasn't said anything lately, as you're thinking about your KubeCon US opportunities, it would be great to know if you're interested in participating, because that way we can make sure to put together the proposal to cover what people are able and interested in saying about our testing or anything else.
Yeah, well said, Bridget. Would love to provide any help that I can if new people would like to get involved in this process. I think it's very healthy for the community and for the SIG for us to be like having new faces up there. And I realize that it can seem like anxiety inducing to think about giving a talk at KubeCon, but there's a lot of good experience in this community, and we can kind of come together and help anyone out who needs it. So if it's something you're thinking about, and maybe you don't feel comfortable saying it here or whatever, reach out to myself or Bridget privately if you're interested. Like we can start talking about things there. And I guess we'll have to kind of be judicious too, because I don't know if the conference committee will let us get away with another. We're removing cloud providers for real this time.
I mean, I think that they'd probably really be interested in our testing approach.
Right, that's what I was thinking too. Like I would love to see a talk about like testing and how it can get better or something. But yeah, let's
Yeah.
take a week or two and get some ideas together, and then yeah, just see if anybody kind of comes out of the woodwork or yeah.
See if we can draft Antonio.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, right.
I don't know if he's going to make it to KubeCon US, but be like, get on a plane from Spain.
Yeah, like I don't know if we want to see a talk from Dims and Antonio about like, look at all the trouble that SIG Cloud Provider causes me on a daily basis. And that might not be good for us.
Well, I mean, if we're pairing with them, we're like, this is what we're learning and this is what we're doing. So anyway, let's think about it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you, Bridget. And thanks for bringing the topic up too. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have open here. It looks like there's a lot that needs triage in the last couple weeks here. Okay, well, I guess let's just start looking at these. Kubernetes service not distributing traffic unequally, seeing imbalance in traffic. Okay. Sorry if this is, try to make this a little bigger. Huh. This sounds like a load balancer thing, not necessarily specifically a cloud controller manager thing.
Yeah, I kind of scrolled down to the end and I looked at the stuff that Adrian was putting on there and Antonio. And it's like, I don't think we've gotten adequate testing from, yeah, right there where Antonio says you need to test inside the cluster and from outside to find out where the actual problem is. I'm not sure if we got an answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that this is necessarily a cloud provider issue. Like in like the CCM issue, it still sounds like maybe this is just a configuration issue for them or something AWS specific, perhaps.
So the one thing I will say is if it is AWS specific, it has been pretty normal for them to send it to us just as a means to get it routed to the right people.
Adding an R to load balancer,
Oh yeah, good.
just to not confuse them.
Is that Kirthan? I don't know if you had it, since this is AWS specific. I don't know if you have any comments you wanted to add here or anything you thought I should add.
No, I think that should be good. Like I'll also take a look, and I also have to see if they're using, because in now we have like a separate component which is handling the load balancer creation. So it's not even Cloud Pro to AWS.
Okay.
That is moved to a separate component like which is running as a controller and creating the load balancer objects.
Okay.
I'll even ask them to see if they're yeah, I mean, yeah, you can see mine. I think it's KMALA.
Yeah, I'm trying to, Kirthan, is that?
KMALA. No, that's not.
Yeah,
that's
I
not.
always forget it. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, cool. Thank you, Kirthan. Okay, SIG Cloud Provider, hybrid cloud native support. This is a feature request. Okay, that's cool. They would like to add the hybrid cloud equal true flag.
I did this issue.
Oh, cool. Yeah, please, Sergey.
Um,
If you want to talk about this.
Probably I need to add more details about this. I've been working with Kubernetes more than 5 years in hybrid cloud, and I'd like to share my experience what's happened with CCMs. For example, setup you have bare metal cloud, like pure bare metal, and near you just, I don't know, OpenStack or maybe Equinix Metal, doesn't matter. So in this case, like you have the normal load, and if you need to more like capacity, you just scale out the virtual machine from your cloud provider. In this case, you need to run like more than one CCMs. One CCM which handle your bare metal and another from your cloud provider. And what's happened is, like when you join the node to the cluster, like everything fine. Only one CCM can find the node and like promote it, labels, like define the provider ID and something like this. But in case if you need to delete the node, it's plugin not life cycles do this. Like if a node like disappears or something this happened, most of the cases our CCMs delete this node because they cannot find the node in this instance in the cloud. This is my issue, and what we did before, we just changed a few lines code in each CCM, which can be like protect CCM to not delete the foreign nodes from the cluster. It's usually you just check the provider ID prefix. If it's not matched, so it's not instance, so we don't need to delete it. And I check the code in Azure CCM. They just response like the node exists and feel fine to avoid deleting. So this issue, like I don't know, proposal, how we can handle it, how we can like fix it. In the side of cloud provider, we just need to check this prefix. If it's not much, we like skip this node and do nothing, because like if we cheat the cloud provider, we don't know what will be in future. Maybe if we response like not exist, CCM will do something, I don't know. We don't know the future what will happen. So in my opinion, to make it inside this cloud provider before we call the functions to check the nodes, and like it will be much better. And another one issue here. Imagine a situation when the node joined the cluster, node doesn't have provider ID yet. And what happened in this case? Our CCMs call the provider ID, try to find the node by node name or something, I don't know. If we have some additional information, we try to find the node in cloud provider. And only one CCM can find this node. And issue here, almost all other CCMs just delete the node because they can't find the node because provider ID doesn't exist yet. We can't understand it's all on like foreign. And I did next PR. I don't know. I can put on the Zoom. It's also like discussion PR. I just add the delay. Like when node joined the cluster, they have a timestamp when it joined, when the resource was created. And we just wait a few seconds and then ask node lifecycle to check does not exist or not. And usually like a few seconds enough to find the node and mark provider ID. But this PR covers not only hybrid clouds. It's I did research in OpenStack, and I get like very strange. Not strange. If I need to scale up the huge cluster to find the node by node name, it's very expensive call. We need to check a lot. Like we have to check. I don't know. All regions, maybe, I don't know, we have some additional information. So it's very like, I made the calculation and on the bottom, it's like 450 calls in 5 seconds if we need to scale up 100 node. And we can reach the rate limit. And if code not so good, we can like have issued here. Like maybe we'll lose the node, like it will be deleted, or maybe something happened. It's here like very simple code and with tests. And I think we need to add the flags here, like because to not break our others tests, maybe our others CCMs, we can like provide the global flag where we can set the timeout. Now it's like 1 minute, if I'm not mistaken. But by default, we can make it 0, to support previous behavior, like no wait. And if administrator wants to launch like hybrid cloud, he understand he need to provide the additional time to wait to protect the cluster to fix this issue. So what do you think?
I think it's really interesting, and I think your the original issue here, I think this is really cool. Like, I'm personally very interested in seeing like more how we can do hybrid cloud. I think my personal feeling is the next step is we would probably want a cap so that we could define the behavior of how this will work, because I think there are multiple like if we're trying to solve the problem of a hybrid cloud cluster and how we could have like 2 cloud providers existing in the same, or multiple cloud providers, I think we should focus the cap on that. And then we can discuss like maybe there are other synchronization methods we want to use to help, make it easier to find the nodes or something. But I think in general, I'd love to see a cap next describing what the behavior is, and then we could have the discussion on the cap. And if everyone agrees to it, then we could bring it in as a feature. That's kind of where I'd like to see this go next. I don't know if others. I see Bridget responding in chat here. Does anyone else? Yeah, Walter, please.
So I'm going to start with, I'm not a huge cap fan. Despite that, because I think we overuse caps. I absolutely think this is a place where we need cap. So some thoughts. I mean, I wish we'd discussed this earlier. I could absolutely have told you exactly what would happen the instant you tried to bring up 2 CCMs. The life cycle is the obvious place we're going to hit problems. I don't think it's the only place we're going to hit problems. I am curious to think about kind of, and this is in the vein of other things that we should discuss in the CAP, but one, we have a cloud provider interface, and I'm wondering if we should have a call and add a new call in the cloud provider interface, which is either, you know, give it the list of, have the cloud provider call return the list of nodes it should own, or possibly you give the reference to a node object and you say, is this owned by this cloud provider, right? Because that's a basic piece of functionality that can then be used to solve some of these problems. I also wonder, and you know, this maybe gets into other SIGs, but for things like a node object, it would be really nice if we just labeled, you know, like before the node is even fully initialized, whoever created the node object, if it could label the node with the cloud provider, then I think that allows you to get away from a lot of these problems, because at that point, the lifecycle code, depending on which CCM it's in, knows whether it should be trying to own that particular node object based on the label, right? And I think there are some clear ways that when the node object is written, it could be written with a cloud provider label. And then we can get away from waits. It'll take care of a lot of the problems you were discussing with consuming quota, because you'll never make those calls if it's not a cloud provider, if it's a node for a different cloud provider.
That's kind of what I was thinking about synchronization too. Like I was thinking maybe there'd be some way to label these things and have them meet up, but yeah, good ideas there.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little tricky. I'm trying to remember. I mean, my memory is, I think it might even be the kubelet that writes the initial node object.
Right. Yeah.
And then, but then they presumably, you know, like if every cloud provider is doing this, then they can set up their node, they can set up their labels, they understand their labels. And this is also where I get into questions like, you know, if the cloud provider code itself, if the cloud provider interface has an is my node type method, then, you know, as the cloud providers are rolling out labels or whatever else they're doing, their methods can understand how to check if they own it or not. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm not saying this is the correct answer. What I'm trying to say is I think this is an example of exactly what Elmiko was saying with, we should have a cap and we should explore the options.
So I guess, does that make sense to you, Sergey, or does anyone else have comments they want?
Yeah, it's a very interesting long way solution, but what do you think if provider ID is almost unique? Azure is only one Azure. AWS is only one AWS.
Again,
so the prefix already tells to us to like it's owned by Azure, by AWS.
Absolutely. And this is where I think that cloud, you know, this is why I like the idea of having a new cloud provider method that you take the node and say, is this mine? And then so every cloud provider can recognize theirs. And then we add that into it kind of like you're already doing. You add that in before you start doing any work on a node. You just say, is this mine? No, skip.
If I'm not mistaken, we already have method, like when we initialize the cloud provider, we pass already name of this cloud provider. And this string already will be matched with prefix provider ID.
I think part of the thing here is that we don't want to encode in the common library. We don't want to have to encode any sort of parsing of the provider IDs, right? So the provider ID parsing, we want the individual provider to do that, because otherwise we'll have to keep updating. Like this probably wouldn't happen, but you know, if a cloud provider decided to change the way they were doing their provider IDs, then we would have to update the core library, right? Whereas if it's done through the interface, like Walter's suggesting, then the cloud provider can update it at their leisure. But this is part of why I think this needs a cap, because it's complicated enough that we should discuss the design work And then it sounds like you've already got a solution that's working for you, but hopefully we could capture the design around that and then just bring it in, as a feature into Kubernetes.
Yeah, thank you.
So, does that make sense? Do you want to follow up and like make a cap then and bring it back to us and
Yeah, I have a few ideas, but never did the caps before. For me, a
Okay.
little bit maybe complicated will be.
Well, I would say feel free to reach out in our SIG Cloud Provider Slack channel. And, I'm willing to help you write the cap. I know there are other people there
Yeah.
as well. So yeah,
I was
heard
just
Bridget-
raising my hand to say, yeah, I've written a number of cups. I would be happy to help get the cup off the ground.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, cool. Let me just make a note here.
And you can mention me in there as well so that he can find me and you.
Okay. All right, let's see what the next issue here is. Ah, Sergey, you've got another one here. Or is this a different Sergey? Sorry.
No,
Oh.
it's the idea.
Was this the other issue that you linked, or is this
I found the new changes in Cloud Provider. We can add the labels to the structure. When we installation the node, we can pass the labels to the core, and we have a checks what the labels can't have in Kubernetes namespace. I mean, the name doesn't
Sorry, I got
don't have. Yeah, well, here we checked the regex. It's not a Kubernetes or K8s IO namespace. So I just ask. Probably we need to pass a few labels, like not cloud provider dot Kubernetes IO, because based on GNOME labels, this prefix usually used for some cloud providers unique things. I don't know. Maybe we need just add a few changes before it will be released.
I mean, yeah, that seems like a reasonable request to me. This is not this feature.node.kubernetes. That's not a well-known label though, right? Currently. Or is it?
I found here it exists here.
Are these, is it?
I after two CCMs, and I use these labels. Before I install it, I know what is the node, what inside the node, and add some additional labels here, usually.
Yeah, I mean,
And I do it in my site. I usually do it in my site before the pass. So, and I ask him, maybe we can make it more generic.
So is this label specific to the node feature discovery operator though? That's what I'm wondering. Like, do we need to talk with them if we're going to make changes there?
Probably CCM knows much better.
Right.
What is it?
Right. Well, you would expect the cloud. I mean, I would think the cloud provider could add this if we wanted to.
But we don't want to break NFD.
No, yeah, we certainly can't break NFD. But that's why I'm saying, do we need to talk to them to understand the scope of making changes or adding these? Because I think that's what you're asking for, Sergey, right? It's like the cloud provider should be able to add these labels as well.
It's like you're allowed to add this.
Right.
Because right now I can labels only not Kubernetes namespace.
Right.
And I sent the link in Zoom. Here, like simple example, what I'm currently doing. If you checked, because like we spoke before about like which node belong to which cloud provider, and I labels the nodes like special label node.cloud provider. Can you look on this?
1 second. Yeah, Walter, please go ahead.
So one thing I will say, I get a little. I'm not saying this is what you're asking, Sergey, but I just want to be very clear. For anything like this, there needs to be a central point of authority about what the labels are for the Kubernetes labels. Anything that's Kubernetes.io, and so we do not want individual cloud providers polluting that namespace, right? Because at some point there could be a collision later. So, if a cloud, like if Google wanted to add something to that namespace, it has to happen in KK in full visibility that they are reserving that label for a particular usage so that everyone is aware of it. It cannot happen in cloud provider GCP. And so I just want to start by saying, that is an absolute hard requirement, right? So generally, if Google wanted to write its own label, I would recommend that it actually use a Google namespace for those Kubernetes features that it wants its own special handling on, rather than a Kubernetes generic label.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So it sounds like the follow-up here would be to talk with the node feature discovery maintainers as well to understand what we can, like what we're allowed to do with that namespace. If we're not allowed to if they don't want us to be adding or changing these feature node, then we would have to think about using a different label for this. So I just want to say, like, what should we accept this as triage then, and then have a follow-up to meet with the NFD team?
Yeah, I think that's going to be necessary. Because to add to what was said before, especially once behavior has existed, it could be very disruptive to people we know nothing about if we suddenly change what they're expecting. And then their clusters break, and then everyone's sad, and they're all paged, and they miss their weekend with their family, and no one wants that. So let's be careful and also try to make this effective. We just have to maybe call it something different if the collision is going to be a problem.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. And we got just about 10 minutes left here. Let's see if we have any more. Okay, this is the one we were just looking at. So let's see, Jan opened up this one. Persistent volume label admission plugin provides wrong Azure region. So I'm guessing this is a problem with the Azure volume label admission plugin.
I'm looking at this.
Oh, no in tree cloud provider.
Huh. It looks like we have Andy answering on it.
Oh, that sounds bad. Not being able to use CSI.
Hmm.
Do you want me to triage or accept this and assign it to you?
Yeah. Assign it to me, and I will get over and figure out if this is going to be a bug fix and backport, or if it's going to be a docs update. Because like the thing about the entry persistent volumes being deprecated but still supported, it's like, I don't know. I kind of have a quibble about how supported is something that is deprecated. So we have to look and see exactly what we're telling people to use.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. It makes perfect sense.
Like maybe we're giving incorrect information about what should work. I'm
Right.
gonna have to dig into it to find out. If anybody already has opinions or thoughts about whether or not this should work. Cause my first guess is like, oh wait, this is old stuff that should not work, but maybe that's incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect the CCM to be adding this now, but I guess not to the PVs. The CSI controllers should be adding it to the PVs, but it sounds like maybe this just needs to like follow what's going on here and then figure out where it's breaking down.
Yeah,
Okay,
and we
well,
can take yeah,
we got it to the right hands now, right?
yeah. Well, I will talk to folks and figure out, are we gonna take a fix for 1.29 or do something else?
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I guess that's pretty much it for this week's meeting. Thanks everyone for coming out, and I guess we'll probably see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Take
Thanks.
care.